Hello. That's an awesome way to start the stream, right? Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm gonna take the headphones off now. If y'all in the chat can just give me a thumbs up to let me know if the mic audio level is good, then I'll be ready to continue. Take this off so it's a little bit less confusing for me. And I'm just gonna do one last check of the audio levels. Thumbs up, yay! Hello everybody, welcome to my first Friday Headexplodie Open Studio live stream. Tonight I am celebrating because I reached my goal on Patreon of having at least 50 wonderful patrons join the Headexplodie community. Thank you so much. Y'all are awesome. And as part of one of the goals that I set on Patreon of when I get the 50, I was going to do a Q&A and studio tour for everyone. So welcome to the Headexplodie studio. Let me see. Let me go to my next slide. Yay! Oh, and thank you, Amanda. I should be the one offering you snacks, actually, because I am the host tonight and I'm inviting you to my space, but thank you. Very generous. I forgot to order dinner tonight. Shoot. Just food. The food thing just reminded me that I still need to do that. I'm sorry to my partner who is watching this and probably very hungry in the next room. Yes, thank you for hanging out with me. Quick Patreon updates. A really fun thing that I got to do last month is host a live demo of how to sculpt self-portrait sculptures. Really happy to do it. It was a really fun project for me, and also like really fun to see everybody in the Zoom room. And thank you so much to the patrons that have already sent in feedback for me and some pictures and photos of your work in progress so far. It has warmed my heart so much to see everybody trying out using polymer clay and baking with polymer clay, and then I love so much the stories that accompany the self-portrait sculptures, because that's actually like, I didn't want to only teach the technique, but the whole idea of like doing self-portraits is really my friend Taylor is actually doing a workshop about self-portrait paper mache heads, and what she put in her Instagram story was that it's a really cathartic experience, and I 100% agree. And that's part of why I wanted to teach like this particular type of or subject matter for sculpting. So yeah, I got to do that over on Patreon. I did a live demo for folks to kind of like beta test the class for me. Thank you so much for all the feedback. It is helping me to refine the class, and I think I'm gonna do a new sculpture that I'll video record and offer it up on something like Skillshare or something like that. I'm not sure yet. I'm still researching like video course platforms, but I think that is where like the final version is going to end up. Let me go to my slideshow. But yeah, like I said, one of the things I wanted to talk about was why do self-portrait sculptures? And I said basically like to celebrate yourself. So some of the prompts that I came up with were, if you wanted to sculpt yourself on a very special day, perhaps an outfit that represents your year. Perhaps it's yourself after you overcame a challenge. Maybe you are sculpting yourself on a day that your life changed. that you felt proud of yourself, an outfit that you wish you had, you wielding your superpower, or perhaps a magical version of you, or your everyday outfit, because I do believe that beauty can be found in the mundane. Or basically maybe it's a day that you felt like a badass, and I really hope that everyone has had at least one day in their life that they felt that good about themselves. So the day that I taught the class, so that was a Saturday, and then on Sunday I did a live storytelling student showcase thing. I was a student in Corey Rosen's 5-week storytelling workshop, and I got to actually got to tell a story about the sculptures that I made, and I'm going to share that with you at the end of this live stream. But it was just kind of like perfect timing, perfect opportunity to tie together all of these thoughts that I've been having. And over on the Patreon, I've kind of been like telling different versions of this story about making these sculptures, and also there is the story about beating Pee Wee Herman that's tied into here, so somehow that gets related. So if you stay tuned to the end of tonight's stream, I will play that recording for you, and then you'll see how everything kind of came together in my brain. So I did want to share some of the work in progress and some of the finished sculptures that have been sent in so far. And then of course, for any of you that did take the live class or see the live demo, the replay is available up on Patreon. Sculpting these things, you know, it is a bit of a time-consuming process, so no worries if you haven't had time to do yours yet, or you know, it takes a little bit of a process having to like rebake bits over and over again. So, you know, take a few weekends, whatever. The feedback form again is going to be up on the Patreon for a long time. So just send me updates whenever you're ready. So here's some that have been sent in so far, which I'm so excited to share with you. Amanda Harris was the first person to send in her sculptures, and it cracked me up so much that she sent in the like work in progress images too. So thank you so much, Amanda, for not only your incredibly robust and thoughtful feedback, but thank you so much for these images that cracked me up when when I opened up the feedback form. So this was Amanda's work in progress. And then this is how her final sculpt came out, and her story that went along with the sculpture. She says, "My favorite thing to do when I travel with friends is to do escape room marathons. And this is my usual uniform: flip-flops, jeans, and a jewel-toned puzzle or escape-themed t-shirt." That is freaking awesome. I love that you did like you doing escape rooms. I miss those. I've done a couple of them. They are super fun, and I love that this is like a favorite hobby of yours. Yes, the freckles are awesome. And then it looks like, I don't know if you used some like iridescent Sculpey for the hair, but that looks really cool too. I'm guessing that's probably what you did. There's a nice like a little bit of a sheen to it. I love it, and I love the flip-flops. So this is Ian's. Ian said that his sculpture's reference is a rare photo of myself that I enjoy. It was a candid snap my partner at the time took while on a hike. For some reason, I have stepped into the brush. I have a very silly expression on and am posed in a weird momentary way. The photo and sculpture remind me of how overwhelmed with joy I feel when surrounded by nature and green and with someone special. So I love it. I love it already. Good luck, Ian, with the rest of your sculpture. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on Patreon if you need any help with anything. But I love the progress so far, and I especially love so much the story that you shared. Because I agree, looking at a photo, or when you eventually kind of finish this piece and being reminded of that time and that specific memory, is a wonderful thing. So I love this one from Kaylee Brock, and it is called Quarantine Claylee. And it's awesome. Look at that tiny fanny pack with the tiny zipper and the ombre hair. So awesome. And the cap. Everything about this is really, really awesome. So Kaylee, I guess this is you and how you will remember the quarantine times. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love this one too. Amanda, the title, Note to Self, You're Allowed to Bloom, which I love reading the title of that. I saw you posting sort of the work in progress images, and I saw like the really awesome flower hoodie, which I thought was like a really, really cool design. And so I love kind of the very touching title that goes along with the sculpture. I'm so excited that you're playing with a polymer clay, and good luck with when you eventually apply the color to it. And then this one is from Courtney. I love the detail on like the little roller skates and all of the roller skating equipment too. And of course, again, I love the story behind it. I took up roller skating just a few weeks ago as a way to spend some active time with my daughter. It's quickly become our new favorite thing to do together, and I wanted to celebrate that joy in this piece. It still needs some paint, and she's a tad wobbly, just like me on skates. Hoping to finish it up in my free time this week. So I love that like a couple of these sculptures are about spending time with like a loved one, and that people have talked about like a moment of joy. And I love that you've shared that with me, and it's just sort of this like beautiful exchange of joy and kind of acknowledgement of gratitude. So yeah, thank you so much everybody again for participating in the class and for sharing your beautiful stories with me. Michael in the chat said, for Amanda's, that immediately reads as a hoodie even without paint or any other views. Great sculpt! I agree. Alright, so we're going to do the studio tour portion of tonight's live stream. There's a panorama of my studio. Over on the left is my fabrication and shooting stage. It's where I make my puppets and where I shoot my animations. In the middle is where I am sitting right now, my editing station, my live streaming desk, flanked by big shelves full of supplies and toys to the left and the right. And then on the far, far right is a bunch of art, toys and junk, and guitars and ukuleles for when I need to take a work break. So I shared this video on my Patreon, and I'm gonna share it again for anybody that's here that hasn't seen it. My friend Christy at Tiny Oak Media shot this really lovely, like beautiful little video of me in the studio. so you get to see like a little bit more of me like interacting with the puppets in the room. Hello! Welcome to my studio. As they say, this is where the magic happens. I do a lot of this because it's sort of, you know, art is the way that I process the world. I like making little characters come to life. And when I'm done with these puppets, they just kind of live, they just end up living around the studio. So thank you again, Christy, for shooting that. And thank you for letting me share it and for letting me use it. You make the space look really pretty. In actuality, I mean, it's a cute space. I actually have a different puppet cam view. I call it puppet cam, it's studio cam. It's a mess today, but I'll just do like a little, you can see there's all my junk. It's my shelves, guitar, my clay pasta machine, puppets that from old projects are kind of just like hanging out at the top there. A bunch of crap on the floor, green screen. I've got my clay down there, various supplies. There's a box that's just Halloween stuff, big toys, props, adhesives, fabrication stuff, Play-Doh. I have 2 boxes of slime, clay, paper. Yeah. That is my studio. Chaz Spencer 1889 says, I like the high fidelity poster. The Elliott Smith poster? Is that the one you're referring to? I think that's the one you're referring to. Let's get to some Q&A. I've got a lot of good Qs. I'm going to try to give you some good A's. Thanks, folks, for sending in some questions. If you have any other questions that pop up during the stream, feel free to type them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them, and I'll do my best to try not to be boring about my answers. So, my first question is about learning Dragonframe. So for anybody that doesn't know, Dragonframe is the frame capture software that a lot of animators use, stop motion animators use to, when they're taking pictures of their animations and collecting them in the software. It's a great software, highly recommended if you're a person that is going to be spending a lot of time doing stop motion animation. Yeah, so the question was, I would love to know if you have any helpful resources when it comes to learning how to use Dragonframe. Yes. So the first thing I would say is that on YouTube, the Dragonframe, the company themselves, they actually have like a pretty good playlist of some basic like how to use the software. So I'd recommend, if you haven't already, just doing a search for Dragonframe 4 tutorial. And it's a series of videos in their playlist that kind of take you on a walkthrough of like the very basic functions, and probably in the order that you would want to learn that knowledge and use it. Aside from that, I am a patron of stop motion artist named Goldies. So shout out to Goldies. In his silver membership tier of his Patreon, he actually has a series of Dragonframe tutorials, and he shows how he uses it. And they're really good. I haven't gone through all of them, but I love the way that he's put them together. If you're not familiar with his work, check out his videos on YouTube. And yeah, I was planning on making some at some point, but really, like, a lot of other people have already done pretty good, like, intro to Dragonframe videos. But yeah, I like Goldie's series on his Patreon. And the person that asked this, I believe you are a member of the Pick My Brain tier on my Patreon. So if, as you're learning the software, if you happen to have any like specific questions about the interface or anything, drop it in the Patreon and I will answer it in my monthly office hours videos. I had a feeling you'd know about the good tutorials. Yeah, I think, yeah, there's like a lot of ones that you can find on YouTube. I just really like Alexander's, which is Goldie's on Patreon. Speaking of, starting a Patreon. Start now or wait for a following? So, yeah. The full question, do you have any advice when it comes to starting a Patreon? I get this question a lot, and I would say that starting a Patreon is not really that different from starting on any other platform, whether it's, you know, like a YouTube channel, a TikTok, an Instagram, or like an email newsletter. Like in terms of just starting one and learning how to use it and then cultivating like an audience on those platforms, it's all kind of the same. It helps to know why you want to do it. So, you know, like an email newsletter is a great way to write letters and communicate news to an audience. Instagram's a great way to show off your work or have an online portfolio. YouTube is a good platform for sharing videos, and for all of these platforms there is a bit of a learning curve. So it is good to just kind of like just start one to learn how to use it. And then see if you like it. See if you like using that platform, if it's appropriate for whatever it is you're trying to do on it. That's kind of how I eventually got good at like doing Instagram, just because it was like fun and interesting. Like I didn't get on Instagram to like make money or like cultivate a huge following at first. I was just kind of like messing around with stories and micro videos and things like that, and really kind of seeing what the capacity was that that platform could do for me. If you're on any of these platforms specifically to make money, then it is like a business experiment where it takes a long time to grow an audience and develop like a relationship with your audience, where basically there's an exchange of resources. So an audience member is exchanging financial resource for whatever it is that you want to offer them. So maybe it's educational content, maybe it's merchandise, maybe it's just the simple act of you putting artwork out into the world. So if you already have like a large following on a different platform, like I have a decent following on Instagram, it was a lot easier to like ask those people that I had already cultivated a relationship with to follow me over to Patreon, or to like follow me over to an email newsletter, and hopefully like eventually follow me to YouTube as well, since I'd like to start putting more videos up on here. So I think the answer is basically start now if you want, to just learn how to use it and play around with, again, like what you could offer, play around with the different kinds of posts that you can make on Patreon. And the rest of it is just kind of like, it's a business experiment. And how well you can, again, kind of communicate what you have to offer on Patreon, and finding the people that are interested in what you have to offer in terms of like a monthly membership. I also wanted to say, so when I started, I had a few people join in the beginning, and it was cool, and most of those people were actually friends of mine in real life, so like, again, I already have a relationship with those people. They knew what I was about and wanted to support me, which I am ever so grateful. Thank you so much, y'all. I didn't really grow my patron count until I joined a business coaching group and really with other like solo business owners, and really learned how to be better at, like, again, figuring out what I had to offer, who I would want to offer that to, and just making that very clear in my communications. So when people sign up for my Patreon, I ask them to vote for like what kinds of things they would like to see. And the number one thing that people vote on is always like tutorials. So that is something that I've been trying to develop and trying to share a lot of my behind the scenes, how I do stop motion, like actual client projects that I've worked on for students of stop motion, people that are just kind of like curious and dabbling in stop motion, or people that are, you know, maybe they're also like professional creatives that are interested in the medium also. So yeah, I think when I shared the beta version of the sculpting class, that was when I saw like another jump in patrons, because yeah, people were interested in learning how to sculpt. So that was super cool. So what part of starting and maintaining a Patreon do you find the most challenging, and how do you deal with it? The most challenging part is that Patreon as a platform is super duper open-ended. There's so many different kinds of creators. There's like, you can be a musician, you can be a writer, you can be a podcaster, you can be a vlogger, you can be a stop motion weirdo. So that's cool, because like anyone can use it and offer, you know, like a membership. What's hard is it's almost like choice overwhelm when it's so open-ended, and like no one can tell you if you're doing something right or wrong. It's just, you kind of just have to try it and see if it's working for you or not. But Patreon itself is really good at sharing a lot of resources for creators, for learning how to use the platform and learning how to be successful on the platform, I guess you could say. And so if you're interested, definitely check out like the resources for creators on the Patreon website. They hosted accountability groups last season, and I think they're still doing it now, where people could get together with other Patreon creators and set goals and, you know, kind of keep each other accountable for meeting those goals. And I met a couple of like really amazing other ladies doing Patreon, offering like very different things, but we were able to just share ideas about how to use it and do kind of like skill sharing with each other. So I've actually learned a lot about Patreon from other Patreon creators. So check that out if you're interested in doing that. The other aspect of what is challenging about maintaining a Patreon is the time management, which is probably a challenge for anybody that is a self-employed creative person. Time management is tricky, and so for me, like balancing Patreon along with like doing client work and doing like extracurricular activities and just like having a life has been hard, but here is what has been working for me. Let me give you a peek into the nerdy workings of my brain. I have learned different project management techniques, and I've basically become Jared from Silicon Valley, and I'm my own Scrum Master. Jared is like one of my favorite characters on that show, if you watch it. So I use a combination of like Agile methodology and Scrum and Kanban boards for my project management, and it's kind of how I keep track of like all of the business things I need to do. And I cannot get into the rabbit hole of these systems because it will literally explode my head, but my partner is a Scrum manager, so that was really helpful, and he taught me like the methodology. So I'll just give you a little peek into like my Patreon board that I use. I use Asana for project management. So this is like my Patreon board. I have a lot of templates and like project stories to keep track of all the things that I need to do within Patreon as far as like fulfilling the membership perks. So, you know, that's been helpful to just keep track of like doing a live stream or doing the Into the Lab video series and things like that. And then all of this is tied into like a larger Asana Kanban board, which is kind of how I deal with my week to week. I guess it's technically called like Scrumban, which is, and I don't know, I do my own weird like artist version of Scrumban, and it keeps me from going insane and putting like too much on my plate, and gives me a good idea of like how much capacity I have to do work. I don't know, does anyone else like use Agile in the chat? I know that Michael does. This is maybe not for everyone, and it took me like a good long year to like really learn it. But my artist brain like has a lot of difficulty keeping track of my time because it just, you know, you get into different flow states and then you lose track of time. So like having this system along with like time tracking software helps me get an understanding of what is working for me and what I need to change in terms of like what is the best use of my energy, because I have like a limited amount of energy. So that's basically like how I manage like doing like Patreon stuff and like all the other worky work stuff that I do. Let's talk about the puppet morgue. Somebody said that yes, they would love to see some disembodied puppet heads. So let me switch back over to Puppet Cam. And we're gonna put this over here. Let's see. Hopefully that'll do it. So I have a box of puppets from old projects. I usually keep them. So let me show you some heads. So firstly, this is a project. This puppet is of Gigi Morales for a project that I did with the Greater Good Science Center. Let me turn on the light. Maybe that'll also help. This is a Julian Clark Studios armature removable head. So here are some other puppet heads that I have used with this armature. This is also from a video that I did with the Greater Good Science Center. This is Wajahat Ali, and his eyeball is kind of floating around. I attached the facial pieces on there with Vaseline, so you know when they're in storage they just kind of like float around. But yeah, I just kind of like create a hole that's big enough to fit over the neck of the armature, and then I can just reuse this over and over again. I still need to like rip the clay off of it so I can reuse it for a future puppet that I make. So this is Wajahat Ali. And then here are the first puppet heads that I used with this armature. This is from a video called How to Apologize with Jolenta Greenberg and her husband Brad. his the mouths are put away in a separate box right now. This is Brad and Jolenta. And so it's a hard sculpey head with plasticine clay hair. So there's those guys. I've got one more. I have, also in storage, the disembodied head of Pete Docter, the Chief Creative Officer of Pixar, because I did a video for the Greater Good Science Center with him also. So his glasses are broken. This is his head. So that's Pete, and the mouth is in the little bag also. But I also wanted to show the clay, the flat clay plasticine head that I made of Pete, which was fun. So those videos are on my website. If you click on the page that's for the Greater Good Science Center. I really like this one. It's a technique, I guess, which is called like 2.5D. Like it's not quite 2D, it's not quite 3D. It's a little bit of both. The ears have fallen off. And in the video, he's like walking with his head, and then you get to peek like inside of his head, and you see like a jumble of 2D doodly doodle animation. And I think the idea is like, it's like how to clear your head, and the video is about going on not nature walks, but like awe walks. Which is a really helpful thing to do. So I'll probably do an Into the Lab video about making this, because this was super fun. I got to make this hand with a magnifying glass, and we got to do some fun stuff with that video. Yeah, I think that's that. So there's some puppet heads. Yes, I do mix different kinds of clay together. Not like mixing them together, but like I'll bake a hard sculpey head, again, for example, and the hair I may do out of plasticine clay. There's a video, there's a monthly office hours video that I did, I think 2 months ago or something, where Taylor, one of my patrons, has asked about clay and different kinds of clay, and that's where I talk a little bit more about how I mix different kinds of clay together in stop motion animation. So that was a peek into the puppet morgue. Next question. Am I interested in other types of puppetry? Yes. I used to be a puppeteer. That was my background and sort of like introduction to the world of stop motion animation. So we have a children's park here in Oakland called Children's Fairyland, and Fairyland has something called the Storybook Puppet Theater, and that's where that's where I fell in love with the art of puppetry. And we would do marionette puppets, rod puppets, hand puppets. I loved it. I would love to do more sometime. I would love to get back into it. I really enjoy live puppetry. And I used to design backgrounds for puppet shows, and I did one time get to design a show with the director of the puppet theater, and it was called The Magic Tea Kettle, and it was about the Japanese folktale with the tanuki. So I designed like a tanuki puppet. Here is a little bit of a clip of that. Love puppets. Alright, so with unlimited time and money, what would I want to make? The project that comes to mind lately, and it was just because I made this one video where I was messing around with one of my claymations and like compositing like live video in it. It was really fun, and it kind of reminded me of like Space Ghost Coast to Coast, where there was like 2D animation with like video of like a live human interview guest, and I would kind of love to do something like that. I wanted to do a claymation talk show and then have like invite my artist friends to be guests and then just chat about like weird things and like surreal things could happen. So that would be cool. If someone wants to fund that one day, get in touch with me. I think that would be super, super fun. This is a clip of my, little bit of like stand-up Zoom comedy that I did a couple of months ago, like composited into that claymation. So that's kind of like the kind of thing that I think would be super fun to do. What tunes do you jam to while working? I don't actually like to listen to a lot of music when I'm working because, well, if it's like typing emails and stuff like that, like I can't really concentrate. But here is what has been playing over and over again on my Spotify these days. Sometimes I'll just play an album that I feel like works really well as like a full album, and it's kind of also like a marker of time for me. So Liz Phair's Exile in Guyville, I feel like it's just like a really beautiful, tight album. And then in my head, I also know it's about an hour long, so like I'll play it and then like do work, and then when the album is done, I'm like, oh, it's time to take a break. It's been an hour. I Open Mike Eagle's Anime, Trauma, and Divorce is something that I've just been listening to as an entire album, like over and over and over again, and it's also a marker of like 30 minutes. So I'll play it a couple of times and then I'm like, okay, now it's time to take a break. So I've also put together recently like a John Bryan playlist of all his instrumental film scores. And then I also have a playlist called Wake Up, which I listen to at the beginning of the day. It's a lot of Beastie Boys and the Muffs. But yeah, you can follow me on Spotify. I have a few public playlists up there, and I like putting together playlists and hoping to do some more and like make some fun like Spotify playlist art to go along with them. There's also like a few down there that are playlists of like 120 minutes episodes because I'm a nerd and I really liked that show. And I don't know, there's just something also about like the nostalgia of like not watching an episode of that show because it's all music, but just kind of like playing all the music. Yeah, those are all the questions. Let me know if you have any other ones. Although I think I'm getting close to like wrapping up for the live stream. So thanks everybody that's tuned in live so far and for hanging out, and for also like anybody that's on the East Coast, thanks for hanging out kind of late, I guess. I'm about to have dinner in like 15 minutes. But yeah, again, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the patrons that have signed up and helped me meet the 50 patron goal. My next goal is to have 100 patrons. I'd really, really love to have 100 Headexplodie patrons by this fall. And basically, like, if I have that many people signed up, it means I can dedicate more time to doing like fancier live streams and like fancier video content and tutorials and stuff like that. So that's my next goal. If you're watching this and not yet a patron and you want to see what's happening over in the Headexplodie Patreon land, please visit the Patreon link in the video description below and check it out. Yeah, again, like one of the things that has been really fun lately that the patrons have helped me to do is giving me feedback on this self-portrait sculpting class. Ooh, JCL Motion, gonna look up John Bryan. Yes! Love his work. And Michael says, Matt Pinfield knows all. He is super cool. I really enjoyed him hosting that show. So, speaking of self-portraits, I had the opportunity to take a storytelling class from Corey Rosen last month. For anybody that's been following the Patreon, this is the same teacher that I took the comedy class with. He's just really fun. He actually used to be a teacher of mine in grad school. And so I took the storytelling class too. I loved it so much. And one of the prompts that Corey gave us was to build a story around the theme of idols. And that gave me an opportunity to like express the full story behind making these self-portrait sculptures and what working on them has meant to me. And it has to do with like tying together these experiences of meeting different creative heroes in my life, as well as the need to see myself in the world. So I'm going to close out the night with the recording of the story I told at the end of the 5-week workshop, which I told to a live audience over Zoom. So here it is.
Welcome. You're just in time. I'm about to introduce our next storyteller, so please welcome to the stage Annie Wong. Woohoo!
So, growing up in Texas, I was surrounded by like a lot of symbols of worship. Lots of Jesus paintings, lots of crosses, mega churches. My parents didn't raise me with any particular religion because they weren't really religious and it just wasn't really a thing for our family. But seeing all of these symbols made me feel like everyone else was like part of this club that I wasn't invited to, where all of the members kept on referring to him with a capital H, and that he would save you. And I was like, okay, but like, who is he? I've never met him. The closest I've ever gotten to this feeling of connection to a higher power is through art. So for example, when I was 16 years old, I was in love with Elliott Smith. Elliott Smith was a singer-songwriter who grew up in Texas like me, and he wrote these songs that just dripped with loneliness and a quiet anger that when I would listen to his music, it would seep in through my ears and move through my body like an emotional filtration system. And I drew a really girly portrait of him playing guitar, surrounded by stars with his lyrics in the sky. And instead of like paintings of Jesus, I had this portrait of Elliott hanging up on my bedroom wall. And I derived great comfort looking up at it. So I was brimming with excitement when I finally got the chance to meet him after a show at Waterloo Records in Austin. I brought the drawing for him to sign, and I also made a copy to give him as an offering. He signed the original drawing to Annie, Heart Elliott. And I was like, that's my name, next to a heart, next to his name. And I handed him the duplicate, and he asked me how I would like it signed. And what I wanted to say was, oh no, This is for you, heavenly being. Thank you for making this beautiful art that helped me move through my own pain. I know I'm only 16 and you're 29, but we both grew up as misfits in Texas, so let's run away and be sad together. But all that my teenage brain could muster up was, this is for you. And he took it and looked at it kind of confused, and he said, oh, okay, thanks. And continued signing autographs. So I saw Elliot again a few years later at Bottom of the Hill in San Francisco. But on that night, this heavenly being looked broken. It's not a secret that Elliot struggled with mental health and addiction, because he's a human being just like the rest of us. But seeing him that way really changed the way I felt about hero worship. That is until many, many years later, when I had the opportunity to meet another creative hero of mine, Paul Rubens, aka Pee Wee freaking Herman. Paul's work gave me permission to be playful, zany, and fun, and a little bit obnoxious. And I just really wanted Paul to see that the aesthetics and philosophy of Pee Wee's Playhouse is embedded in the DNA of some of the cartoons that I make today. So the night before I was going to see him, I recreated this piece of artwork that he had actually reposted on the internet a while before. And it was this pink, bug-eyed, screaming ice cream cone made out of clay and an actual varnished ice cream cone. And I attached this gold chain around this ridiculous looking thing, and I wore it as a necklace. So when it was my turn in the meet and greet line, I walked up to Paul and he stared down at my chest and he said, "That's a very interesting necklace. Wait, I know that ice cream. You didn't make that, did you?" And I said, "I did." And then he told me I was very talented and he gave me a hug. And then I basically died because I had just been knighted by the Queen. Paul's recognition of my work sent my spirit out of my body and up into the heavens. And I was on cloud nine for the rest of that night and for several days after that. Having been seen by this greater creator made me feel like I could do anything. I could take over the world. But then 2 weeks later, the world shut down because of the global pandemic. And nobody was going to be executing any plans for world domination, because we're all susceptible to panic, illness, and grief. So where do I turn to now for comfort? Who's the capitalized pronoun that's going to save me now? Well, I had a bodily experience recently that pointed me in the right direction. I once again saw myself in someone else's art. And this time it was in the movie Minari, which is written and directed by Lee Isaac Chung. So the movie Minari is about a Korean family pursuing the American dream, trying to make a life for themselves on a farm in rural Arkansas. And in this movie, I witnessed Asian family dynamics that echoed my own family's. I saw Southern religious worship stuff that reminded me of my experience growing up in Texas. And while I didn't need this movie to save me necessarily, the fact that it was getting a lot of prestigious award show attention validated my unseen and unspoken of formative years. So when I found out after that this piece of art was ineligible from competing for the Best Picture category at the Golden Globe Awards, because it's primarily in Korean, not English, my logical language brain was like, yep, of course this would happen. The world is not fair. I know this already. but my emotional heart center was ripped apart. And this rumbling in my chest that I was feeling bubbled up and over into a sloppy mess of tears streaming from my face. Because that feeling of not being a part of this club that everyone else seemed to be invited to came flooding back. So lately, I've been making these little self-portrait sculptures. The first one is me standing tall, wearing a mustard yellow Wonder Woman sweatshirt. The second one I made is of me leaning on an ox, wearing a cowboy hat and a cowboy shirt with red dragons on it. And I'm also wearing a Jade Buddha bolo tie. And the third one I've made is of me wearing my apron covered in 10 years worth of paint projects, my hands clasped over my heart. And to me, they're more than just these sculptures. They're kind of like these little trophies that I've made to celebrate different parts of my story. I derive great comfort giving shape to them and applying color to them, and then assembling them all together on my shelf like a tiny army of me. Because I realized that if I live in a world that repeatedly denies my family's belonging, my visibility, and my humanity, then I need to be the one to see myself and belong to myself. I'm existing to be the person I wish I could have seen as a kid. And while I think it's totally okay to look for spiritual inspiration in a greater creator or in someone larger than life, I think it's also okay to recognize that we're all creators too, and that maybe it's possible to find inspiration in our own little stories, in our own little lives. And while maybe I won't go so far as to call it self-worship, I am okay with calling it self-love. Thank you.
Annie Wong, everyone. Thank you so much, Annie. You inspire me every time you talk. Thank you for sharing your story and your gifts with all of us. It was wonderful.
Gotta turn that microphone back on. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your attention with me tonight. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your stories, and thank you for sharing your joy with me. Your stories matter. Your life is inspiring to somebody, if anyone, hopefully yourself. And you are also existing to be the person that maybe you wish you could have seen as a kid. So have a good night. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe. Good night.